Of Perry Stone Ministries in Cleveland has faced accusations of sexual misconduct for several years.
But setting that aside, I want to share with you a few things that I've gone through recently as I share something very personal with all of you.
For years, Perry Stone built his career warning Christians to watch out for deception. He talked about hidden agendas, corrupt leaders, and spiritual danger. His followers trusted him because he sounded like someone exposing the truth nobody else wanted to touch. But now, many people believe Perry Stone is doing something very different. Because every time criticism appears around his ministry, the focus somehow shifts away from the questions and back toward defending himself. And that's where this story gets strange. The more pressure builds around Perry Stone, the more emotional the responses become. Critics are called negative. Attacks on the ministry are framed like attacks on God's work itself. Loyal followers rush to protect him. And somehow the conversation keeps changing from accountability to persecution. But this may not be just about one preacher. Because when you look closely at celebrity ministries, you start seeing the same pattern over and over again. A powerful personality rises fast, a loyal audience forms around them. The ministry becomes a brand. Then when controversy appears, criticism suddenly becomes spiritual warfare. And Perry Stone may be one of the clearest examples yet. Because behind the sermons and prophecy teachings, there's another question many people are now asking. What happens when a ministry becomes too connected to the man leading it? And one leaked recording may reveal more than Perry Stone ever intended. Recently, Perry Stone posted another message telling people to stop criticizing ministries. He warned that negative attitudes could block blessings and destroy future opportunities. According to him, people who attack ministries are hurting themselves spiritually. But critics noticed something important almost immediately. Perry Stone spent years criticizing other people himself. That's what made him famous. He warned audiences about false teachers, weak churches, political corruption, end times deception, and hidden spiritual dangers. His entire platform was built around discernment. He became known as the preacher exposing what others refused to talk about. But now that the attention is on him, criticism suddenly becomes dangerous. And that contradiction raised bigger questions. Because this isn't only about disagreement anymore. Critics argue that Perry Stone is trying to protect his image by turning accountability into a spiritual problem. In other words, if you question the ministry, you're not just questioning a preacher, you may be resisting God. That kind of framing is powerful, especially inside prophetic ministries. And that's another part of the story many people overlook. Perry Stone didn't build a normal church audience. He built a following around mystery, prophecy, hidden knowledge, and end times warnings. His supporters didn't just see him as a pastor. Many saw him as someone with special insight into world events and spiritual truth, which means attacks against Perry Stone can feel personal to his followers. Because if the messenger falls apart, what happens to the message they trusted for years? And that may explain why even his biggest controversies never fully broke his support base. But then an emotional recording surfaced, and suddenly the situation became much harder to ignore. When the leaked audio began spreading online, many people expected anger. Instead, they heard fear. In the recording, Perry Stone sounded overwhelmed, emotional, and terrified that his ministry was collapsing around him. He talked about losing friends. He worried about accusations destroying everything he built. At one point, he even spoke about shutting the ministry down completely. But critics focused on something deeper hiding underneath the emotion. His identity seemed completely tied to the ministry itself. Again and again, the conversation returned to the same fear, the ministry being ruined, losing the platform, losing the reputation, losing everything connected to the public image he spent decades building. And for many viewers, that changed the entire story. because the recording didn't just sound like a preacher protecting his church. It sounded like someone afraid if the ministry collapsed, he might collapse with it. That's one of the hidden dangers inside celebrity ministries. Over time, the ministry stops being separate from the leader. The church becomes the personality. The brand becomes the identity. And once that happens, criticism no longer feels like correction. It feels like personal destruction. Supporters saw the recording differently. Some believed Perry Stone sounded broken, exhausted, and emotionally attacked from every direction. Others argued the recording proved how much pressure public ministry can place on people. But critics asked another question. If a ministry becomes so dependent on one person's image, can real accountability even happen anymore? That question became even more serious after allegations involving inappropriate behavior started gaining attention, and Perry Stone's response only made the situation more complicated. As criticism increased, Perry Stone continued defending himself publicly. Some supporters believed he was simply fighting false accusations. Others believed the constant explanations were making things worse. One detail especially caught attention. At one point, Perry Stone explained that some physical behavior people questioned came from his Italian family background, where affection and physical touch were considered normal. Supporters saw that as context, critics saw it as deflection. And this is where the story became divided. Because legally, a grand jury later declined to file charges against him. That mattered. Supporters pointed to it as proof that critics had gone too far. But critics argued something else entirely. They said legal outcomes and public accountability are not always the same thing. And even people trying to stay neutral started noticing another issue. The restoration process around Perry Stone appeared surprisingly short. After stepping back for a period, he returned to ministry activity fairly quickly. That raised uncomfortable questions. Who actually holds celebrity preachers accountable? Can ministries objectively investigate their own founder? And when a ministry depends financially and emotionally on one powerful personality, is there real pressure to restore that person quickly no matter what happened? Those questions matter because Perry Stone's ministry is not small. It operates through conferences, books, media broadcasts, prophecy events, and large audiences built over decades. And once ministries reach that level, the pressure to protect the brand becomes enormous. But the most interesting part may be how criticism itself gets transformed inside these environments. Because many followers no longer see attacks on Perry Stone as normal accountability. They see it as persecution. And that changes everything. One reason Perry Stone still has such strong support is because many followers believe he is under spiritual attack. That idea is incredibly powerful inside modern charismatic ministry culture. The moment criticism appears, the situation often changes from "did something happen" to "why is Satan attacking this ministry?" And once that shift happens, critics stop looking like concerned people. They start looking like enemies. Perry Stone has never fully separated himself from that kind of language. His responses often frame attacks on the ministry as attacks against God's work, against revival, or against truth itself. And history shows this pattern works. Many celebrity preachers survive controversy by convincing followers that opposition proves they are important. The bigger the criticism becomes, the more loyal supporters sometimes become too. That creates a dangerous cycle, because now defending the preacher feels connected to defending faith itself. And for longtime followers, walking away is emotionally difficult. Many invested years listening to Perry Stone's prophecy teachings. Some shaped their entire worldview around his warnings about the end times, hidden spiritual dangers, and biblical mysteries. So if Perry Stone loses credibility, followers are forced to face another uncomfortable possibility. What if they trusted the wrong voice for years? That's why scandals around prophetic personalities often become explosive. The audience is not only protecting a preacher, they may also be protecting their own sense of certainty. And this may explain why Perry Stone's supporters remain deeply loyal even after repeated controversies. But another issue kept resurfacing online: money. And critics believed his defense of tithing revealed far more than he intended. Perry Stone recently pushed back against criticism about ministry finances and accusations that preachers only want money. He compared churches to businesses that need income to operate. But critics quickly focused on his teaching about tithing. Many argued that modern ministries use Old Testament tithing language to pressure believers financially. Perry Stone defended giving, but critics claimed celebrity ministries often blur the line between voluntary generosity and religious obligation. And that conversation opened another uncomfortable door. Because Perry Stone's ministry is part of a much larger religious media system built around conferences, products, books, broadcasts, donations, and personality-driven branding. Once ministries grow large enough, image management becomes incredibly important. Critics believe that's one reason Perry Stone keeps responding publicly. Silence could damage the trust holding the entire structure together. But supporters see the situation completely differently. They argue successful ministries naturally attract attacks. They point out that large organizations require money to function. They also believe Perry Stone's critics ignore the people helped through his sermons, conferences, and teachings over the years. And that balance is important, because the story becomes weaker when treated like a simple good versus evil situation. The real issue may be bigger than Perry Stone himself. Modern celebrity ministries often create environments where leaders become almost impossible to separate from the organization. The preacher becomes the product. The personality becomes the message, and followers become emotionally connected, not only to beliefs, but to the individual delivering them. Once that happens, criticism threatens the entire system. And then another clip started spreading online that made critics even louder: the speaking in tongues moment. One clip critics constantly bring up shows Perry Stone speaking in tongues during a public setting. Supporters see moments like this as genuine spiritual expression. Critics see performance, emotional manipulation, and theatrical behavior. But the real issue may not be the clip itself. It's what the clip represents. Perry Stone belongs to a style of ministry where emotion, prophecy, mystery, and spiritual intensity are deeply connected. These environments can create powerful emotional experiences for audiences. For supporters, that feels authentic and life-changing. For critics, it can sometimes feel carefully managed and highly performative. And this tension has followed Perry Stone for years. The more dramatic the ministry presentation becomes, the harder it becomes for outsiders to separate sincere belief from emotional influence. Critics argue that celebrity ministries often rely heavily on atmosphere and authority. Followers trust the leader because the leader appears spiritually powerful. That creates another layer of protection around public figures like Perry Stone. Because once followers emotionally connect spiritual experiences to a preacher, criticism can feel almost threatening to their faith itself. And despite everything, Perry Stone still maintains a loyal audience. His conferences continue, his videos continue, his followers continue defending him online, which raises one final question. Why do celebrity ministries keep surviving scandals that might destroy almost any other public figure? The answer may say more about modern church culture than Perry Stone alone. And that's where this story becomes much bigger than one preacher. At first, Perry Stone's story looks like another controversy surrounding another famous preacher. But the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to ignore the larger pattern behind it. A charismatic leader rises quickly. Followers gather around the personality, the ministry grows into a massive brand, and then criticism appears, and suddenly accountability starts competing with loyalty, emotion, fear, identity, and money. That pattern keeps repeating across modern celebrity Christianity. And maybe that's why Perry Stone keeps defending himself so aggressively. Because once a ministry becomes connected to one person's image, every accusation feels dangerous. Every controversy threatens the structure holding everything together. But what makes this situation different is how openly the pressure has started showing. The emotional recordings, the repeated public defenses, the warnings about critics, the constant effort to control the narrative. Piece by piece, the image has become harder to separate from the man behind it. Still, thousands continue supporting him. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire story. Because the real question may not be whether Perry Stone survives another controversy. The real question is why modern religious audiences keep building systems where one personality can become so powerful that even serious criticism starts looking like persecution. And if that system keeps growing, Perry Stone may not be the exception at all. He may be the warning sign.